Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2025. Going to take me a couple weeks to get used to that. And today we're going to talk about produce labels, how to set prices for produce, and whether those farm courses are worth it. So let's do it. So the usual system for how I do the show is that I wake up at some non-hour, usually 3 a.m., but often my brain gets me up earlier, and I go through the notes for that day, add any relevant topical stuff, and then start work on the notes for tomorrow's show. I do that until around 6:45 or 7 a.m. is when I record, so I am almost always recording what you hear that afternoon on the day that you are hearing it, but just very early in the morning so that I have the next few hours to edit it, and should the internet go out or something, that gives me time to get to town and find some internet and post this thing for you. Now, that does mean there is a huge fragility to this system. If I were to get sick or something was completely to take me out of the game, like a family emergency, I can't really, quote unquote, bank shows for a daily podcast, at least not on my own. Though, when we hire a producer, I do hope to have more leeway there and do some creative things for the days that I may not be here. With that in mind, I think we will be posting that job in the next couple of weeks. It's not a remote job because there will be some potential camera work involved, and the files for these videos alone are enormous, let alone any B-roll. So this particular job will have to be something that requires you to be here already living in Kentucky. Maybe we'll have some remote jobs in the future, but this one, at least for the moment, is going to be very much a here thing. So if you or someone you know has some video or audio editing experience and lives in the area and might be interested, I believe that job listing will be posted really soon. So be on the lookout for that. Anyway, what are we talking about today? Well, I want to tackle a few questions to continue getting caught back up on our Patreon questions from way back in 2024. So today's first question comes from Patreon member Tommy Ryan, who writes, quote, "Hi, Farmer Jesse. As I am looking at Black Friday / Cyber Monday deals, I am thinking about getting a thermal label / sticker printer to use to label my bags. You can get these for less than $50. Looking at Nimbot B1 seems to have good feedback and an okay phone app for designing the sticker and decent prices for paper refills. Any recommendations or things to keep in mind?" End quote. Now, obviously, if you're like, Jesse, Black Friday was like ages ago, you're right, which is why I responded directly there on Patreon for timeliness. But as I said in that response, I also wanted to address label makers on the show for you all. So I don't have experience with that particular label maker that Tommy mentions. We only have used one actual label maker, but it has done a pretty good job for us. That is the Brother USAQ L800, and you don't have to memorize that or write that down or anything. I'll put it in the show notes. I don't know anything about that Nimbot B1, though it does appear to have good feedback and it is fun to say it. But feel free, listeners, to chime in if you have opinions on that one. It's really those two that seem to be the most popular in the market garden world. Alternatively, one thing we did when we first started, market gardening was just use a regular printer with sticker labels. At the time, we weren't including a barcode like we do for our retailer outlets or our organic certification or anything. We were just labeling what the produce was for market, like arugula, lettuce mix, etc. When you're just getting started, especially if you have a printer, that can work, but it's not a long-term solution as it will get expensive and it can be pretty slow. For some of you, though, depending on where you sell your produce, the label may not be necessary at all. I mean, I love the way labeled produce looks, but it's not just one extra step. It's often 2 or 3 steps added to the process, making the label, printing it, and putting it on each bag, etc. I believe it was Ben Hartman who once experimented with labeling versus no labeling at his farmer's market and found that the labels made no significant difference in sales. But don't quote me on that, and sorry to Ben if that was actually a hallucination on my end, and he never actually read said experiment. But what we have done is that sometimes we have like 5 different kinds of greens in bags. So we will label 1 or 2 of the greens just so it's easy for the customer to differentiate, or herbs. Those tiny herb bags can be hard to tell even to the vendor, just like what's in, is it cilantro, is it parsley, those sorts of things. But mostly when we were still doing farmers markets, we were not labeling unless we had to. But for some outlets, you will just have to print labels. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. And listeners, as always, feel free to give us your insight. Up next, let's talk about how to price produce. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruit, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join their mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL, all caps, one word, for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. A quick reminder that if you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, please consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/notillgrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always do my best to answer your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Jeremy Horvath, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, big fan of the daily show format and having it as part of my family's routine." Thanks, Jeremy. I was wondering if you could talk about how you should set your prices as a relatively new grower. I know there are resources where you can look up historical average produce prices, but since they don't represent local small-scale farms like us, it doesn't seem useful. I want to be able to balance costs to produce with customer willingness to pay, but I'm not sure how to pick a starting point for a crop I've never grown before, especially for wholesale prices, which I don't have visibility to at other similar farms. Also, I'm not related to Ethan Horvath. End quote. All right, great questions, Jeremy. And for the listener, the Ethan Horvath thing there is in reference to when I first shouted Jeremy out for the joining the Patreon page, which, again, thanks, Jeremy. I wondered aloud if he was related to the U.S. men's national team backup goalkeeper, Ethan Horvath, which it turns out he is not. But if anyone is related to Ethan Horvath or any other pro soccer players, feel free to give them a big high five for me. All right, so to Jeremy's question, I'm going to address this as a question about how to price produce in general, just to cover all the bases. Keep in mind, there is no one right way to do this, and I'm sure there will be other approaches that people will add to the comments section. However, the one really important thing for everyone to consider is that the market cannot be the only thing that dictates your prices. Your production costs are exceedingly important in determining your pricing, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm going to do both retail and wholesale pricing here for listeners. So we'll start with retail and then get to the wholesale stuff. First, what I do when I'm pricing a new item for retail or for the farmer's market is I get a general sense of what a generic organic version of that item is going for at a large grocery store like Whole Foods or whatever. This gives me a baseline to work with. It is not the definitive final price. If you're doing more wholesale, you can also check wholesale pricing online using that same sort of idea. Google wholesale organic beets, and you should be able to find a few options, even if on Amazon or whatever. But I'll get back to wholesale in a minute. Get an average and use that as a baseline. And of course, the USDA does a market report, so I will link that in the show notes as well to add to for your comparisons. Use at least 2 or 3 online sources because some prices may be outdated or just complete outliers. Note that even if you are not certified but you're chemical free, there is nothing wrong with working from the organic price point, at least to develop your baseline price points. You can't legally market your produce as organic, so the customer will tell you if they feel it's worth it or not. But since you are technically growing without chemicals, I think it's fair to price your produce that way. Now, next, you need to know what it costs you to produce X item. We've talked about how to charge your garden bed's rent in an earlier episode of this daily, basically taking your farm budget for the season and dividing that by the number of growing beds you have to figure out how much each bed needs to earn you. Once you are nearing harvest, you should be able to say, for instance, I have 200 bunches of beets on this bed. I need those beet bunches to make $600 in total, so I have to sell the beet bunches at $3 each. According to Whole Foods right now, bunches of 3 or 4 organic beets are currently going for like $2.99, so that works out. You could also decide to charge a bit more, or if you have way more beet bunches to move, you could potentially charge slightly less if you feel like they're not all going to sell. I don't usually recommend doing that, but I also don't recommend wasting food, so Now, what if you only had 100 beets? off of that bed, but still needed to make your $600. Well, you could make your beet bunches smaller and still charge $3 each, or you could just charge $5 or $6 for the beet bunch if no one else at market is selling beets, especially. There have been times I've had to charge more than I feel comfortable, but it's also important to occasionally test the market and see what it can handle. I've sold out of stuff that I thought was really small, especially like carrot bunches and that sort of thing. But I've also had people complain to me about the price of our shallots being too high, for instance. And in one particular instance, I explained that shallot seed was expensive and it took 5 or 6 months to grow and that no one else grows shallots at our market. And they were like, oh, that makes sense. And they bought a bunch of them. But it indicated that I should at least consider that I was maybe charging too much. Generally speaking, you should not have to work that hard for sales like that, because for every one of those conversations you get to have, there are probably like 10 or more who are just, people who are just not buying the shallots because the price is so high. Conversely, if you're selling out too quickly every week, you're probably also not charging enough. And if you only occasionally get a price complaint, you are probably charging too little in general. So it's a balance, and it's not always clear. The market will let you know pretty quickly if it's too much or too little, though. Another thing to factor into farmers market pricing, at least, is how much other folks around you are charging. Don't undercut them, because in turn, you're undercutting yourself. If the market for tomatoes is $4 a pound, sure, selling them at $3 may move more tomatoes, but you're ultimately losing money and driving the price down for everyone and making your market neighbors angry. And angry people join farmers market boards, and farmers market boards decide who joins or stays at the market, and sometimes where those people get to set up. So don't make market enemies. If customers have to buy their tomatoes at $4, they will still buy their tomatoes. So what you have to do is increase the quality, improve the display, which I don't think anybody says it like that, but improve the display and cherish the customer relationships. Okay, so now on the more wholesale side of things is pricing for chefs. Restaurants are a different monster, because all restaurants are, different monsters. There are high volume restaurants that won't pay as much for wholesale produce, but will buy heaps of it. And then there are restaurants who use a single leaf of lettuce on every plate and won't buy very much produce, but will pay more for higher quality. First, get to know your chef's menu and style so you know what you're working with. Like, is it a high volume restaurant? Is it one of those ones that just puts a single twig on the plate? Second, bring them samples during times when the restaurant is not open or busy. If they have time, ask them what they are paying for X item. They may say, I'm paying $4 a pound for lettuce mix, and you may not be able to meet that, and you probably can't. But bring them a sample and say, this is $9 a pound, or whatever your price is, and it will last you twice as long or more. And see what they say. Let them try it. Let them taste it. Let them have a bag that just sits in the refrigerator for 2 weeks just to prove it. They may not go for it, or they may say, if you can get that down a couple dollars, I'll take 50 pounds a week, or whatever. Develop that relationship and trust, and just be consistent. It does not hurt to just ask them how much they are paying for X item, because you will occasionally realize you could be charging more for something, and you may also be like, oh, I can compete with that. Also, share pricing with other farmers who are your friends. They're often in the dark too, and may appreciate getting some idea of what you're charging for a certain item in exchange for sharing what they're charging. If they're weird about it, let them be weird about it in the dark then. It's on them. Maybe that chef doesn't buy the lettuce, but maybe they want the carrots that you have. So you could start there and keep offering and bringing samples, and maybe eventually they pick up the lettuce. Now, obviously, restaurants are not the only type of wholesale. Some are outlets that want bulk produce, they want to repackage it under their own label, like, I don't know, some supermarkets or something, or their salad stands or whatever. There are also retailers who want you to individually package your produce and sell it that way. For the former, who just want bulk, again, figure out your cost and compare it to what you can find online as a starting point. Same thing, just Google bulk organic carrots or whatever it is, and get an average per pound price of what it's going for. Check the market reports, see if it's in the ballpark of what you need to charge. For the latter, where you are doing the packaging, there should be a premium included in that. I charge 25 cents per bag, for instance, on top of my per pound price to bag stuff individually for a retail outlet. But I'm also always checking the prices of the other sellers to make sure I'm not undercutting or ridiculously overpricing. Oftentimes, this is easy because you can just look at the shelf, see what they are charging for your produce items, do the math to figure out what percentage markup they make, and then figure out what other folks are likely selling their produce for at that particular outlet. Or you can maybe just ask the produce buyer. But if they're being cagey about it, I mean, It's not that hard to figure out. Get creative and just make sure you're not losing money. That's the key, not losing money. Anyway, I hope that's helpful to you, Jeremy. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, let's talk about masterclasses. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnois Greenhouses. Harnois Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnois Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnois is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Harnois Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Learn more at harnois.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. Okay, so I get this question quite a bit, so I doubt it will be the last time I address it here, but this one actually came in from YouTube this week. At MKTI200 writes, quote, "Happy New Year, Farmer Jesse. Happy New Year to you. Never Sink Farm Course. Is the value worth it at $2,900 now? I'm gifting my daughter some educational classes and trying to find some good ones." End quote. Okay, so great question. And since obviously I don't know anything about your daughter's situation or what her goals are, I'm just going to give a basic overview of how to decide if one of these courses is for you with a couple caveats, and you can decide if it makes sense for your daughter or yourself or whomever. First caveat is that I have not peeked inside one of these farm courses in several years. I know the farmers for the main farm courses that are out there, the most popular ones, and I'm sure they would all let me peek inside again upon request. And maybe at some point I can do that again. But here's the thing. Most of these courses are massive, and it would take me a couple weeks of quiet focus to just get a good overview of what all is going on in any one of them. You're talking about hours and hours of videos and seminars with numerous spec sheets in the majority of these courses, at least the ones I've seen inside of. Now, quantity does not inherently equal quality, but generally speaking, these are not like quick money grabs that these guys threw together. They are pretty massive productions. And when we got to look inside of the Market Gardener course, the Never Sink Farm course, the Lettuce Masterclass, which I think is now part of the Living Farms Masterclass. I'm not sure exactly how they sell that. And the Lean Farming courses, and they all had a ton of content in them. That is to say, of the ones I've seen, you are purchasing a pretty robust, serious product. Now, with that out of the way, whether they are worth the amount of money you're talking about because they have gone up in price since I last reviewed them, that is a bit of a different question, and one only you and your budget and your goals can answer. So here is how I would go about this. First, as far as I know, all of these courses have samples online where you can preview the course and see what the farmer and their systems are like. All of them have Instagram pages too. You can kind of do some research on that front. And if you like the production value, if you like the delivery of the information, if their farm looks like what your farm, what you want it to look like or does look like, if they farm in a remotely similar climate, etc., then you can start looking into the prices. There are a few different pricing structures out there, and unfortunately, some of these courses are only available at certain times to drive up pressure on you, which, is an admittedly obnoxious, but also admittedly effective marketing strategy. So finding pricing may be difficult, and it may change by the time the course is available. It's the FOMO that gets you, I guess, but I digress. Nothing is better than experience for learning this business. Absolutely nothing. But to be fair, the case for why these courses may be worth the price for someone is that that person needs a way to learn, and they can't spend a year or 5 working on a farm for little or no money. Or maybe they don't have a farm near them. So these courses are a way someone can theoretically learn a proven farming system, which these courses often include details on irrigation and disease and pest management and all that stuff. They can do that on their own time and get all the details, sometimes with a community of other people in the course with whom they can communicate about successes and failures and that sort of stuff, which that makes sense to me. If you're a single mom or a person with a family to provide for already, or someone who lives in the city and has limited access to growing space, or just insert any less optimal beginning farmer situation, these courses can provide a relatively accessible pathway to learning on your own time and like developing a good farm plan, good farm budget, all that stuff. No doubt you need your hands in the soil at some point to learn this business on any helpful level, but can you learn everything else you need to know about farming from YouTube or from a book instead? Sure, maybe, but also maybe not. It's a lot of work to find everything you would need to know to start or run a farm business on YouTube or in books, and without experience, it's hard to determine the quality of information. So it's really a trade-off of what is more valuable, your time or your money. If you spend the money, a ton of valuable information, at least some of which is probably not findable on YouTube, is immediately deposited at your fingertips in an organized way. Again, if you don't spend the money, then you will spend a lot of time researching and wading through good and bad and unhelpful content, some of which may be absolutely perfect. There's no way of knowing. Of course, we should all be investing in our education in general, no matter what we're doing. $3,000 in one go, though, well, that's a lot for farmers. I don't blame anyone for feeling like it's just too much. I mean, school is expensive, sure, but no easy way to sugarcoat that amount of money. It's just a lot for an industry that is already hard to make a living in. I personally think that all farming information should be free, but I also know firsthand how expensive and labor-intensive making free content is. In fact, we started making a free course a long time ago, and we just could not make it make sense financially or for the amount of labor and time it takes. For us, and I'm not comparing what we do to these courses, they're different monsters, but we elect to keep everything we do free, but I'll be the first to say it's brutally difficult and shockingly low revenue work where I have to constantly ask for support and take on ad revenue or it doesn't continue. So all that to say, although I am not endorsing the prices they are charging, I'm not, I understand these courses also can't really be free. I also imagine what you will see in the comments is a lot of anger about these courses because, yeah, that price tag to learn an industry that's not easy to make even a normal income from, gosh, it's tough. But I'm hopeful that some of those growers who have gone through one of or some of these courses will also add their honest opinion and perspectives in the comments as well about how these courses did or did not help their businesses. I know professional growers, really good ones, in fact, who have gained a lot from these courses. I also know there are people who have felt unsatisfied given the amount of their startup capital these courses are requesting. Perhaps in the future, we can provide a review of each one individually so that you can get a more detailed examination. But I think I'll let the comments do some of that work for now, and I'll wrap up the second day of 2025 there. Huge shouts to Bully Breeding for the theme music and to the team at No-Till Growers. Shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music you are hearing now. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or The Seed Farmer from Dan Brisebois at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or if you just sign up in the month of January, you get a big shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Jill Fetcher, Nathan, Van Duel Rex. These are our earthworms from December. And Brian Green. Doesn't he have like a podcast or a show or something? I'm sure there's only like one or two Brian Greens in the world. And in this episode, they are, this is a group out in Idaho who take a trip to the beach, and they see these like just, miles and miles of strip malls that have those shops in them that have like they sell like shells and like hacky sacks and like goofy t-shirts and stuff like that, and boogie boards and all these things, and they realize like we should start one of these in Idaho. So they move back to Idaho and they start one because you know what, Idaho deserves it. They deserve their own beach shop. I mean, who needs a beach for it? Yeah. Anyway, wishing them the best. Otherwise, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow for Feedback Friday. So leave your feedback. All right. Thanks. Bye.